There's a lot to unpack here, right? We're talking penalties on China for something like so-called fentanyl and how the whole tariff game, notably that outrageous 145% figure, has really stirred things up.
No, indeed. It almost sounds like a roller coaster where one moment officials are blurring the lines about who they're even talking to over trade, and then there's this insistence that China is not participating in negotiations, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the transcript, the speaker basically says, we put penalties and nothing says we're respected, like pretending China is returning your calls. It's a weird juxtaposition of humor and a serious geopolitical stance.
Yep. And then there's that little dance about meetings. Like, we had a meeting this morning, but who exactly were we with? It's almost like a deliberate evasion.
Definitely. It's like there's this constant back and forth. On one side, you have ambiguous mentions of meetings with China, and on the other, you have officials dismissing the idea that there have been real consultations.
I get that. You know, it makes you wonder why would you even bring up a meeting if you're not going to give clear details? Isn't that a bit off?
Well, that's a fair question. It seems like it's more about creating a narrative, leveraging what some call alternate facts to control the public perception. There's even a sarcastic nod to Trump's alternate facts.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of narratives, the transcript dives deep into how tariffs are affecting the economy. It mentions like a huge sell-off on the markets, Dow off 944 points, and similar moves in the S&P and Nasdaq. That's pretty dramatic, right?
Absolutely. It's not just rhetoric. There are real economic ripples. For example, the speaker even contrasts the era from 1870 to 1913, when tariffs supposedly made the US wealthier before switching to income tax. It's almost as if there's a nostalgia for the old tariff-based system.
Exactly. But here's where I'm a bit challenged, maybe even a bit skeptical. Isn't it a stretch to say that a switch to income tax inherently caused economic decline? That line about having more money than anybody back then seems a bit oversimplified.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like comparing apples to oranges, isn't it? The historical context really matters. And while tariffs were a huge revenue source in the past, the modern economy is way more complex.
That's true. And it gets even more tangled when you factor in the political messaging concerning tariffs and supply chains. There's a clear intent to shift the blame onto tariffs as a direct attack on the American consumer.
Right. The narrative suggests that tariffs are not just about trade imbalances, but are linked directly to cost of living concerns. CEOs from major retailers like Walmart and Target are mentioned as having to essentially beg for a pause on these
Yep,
measures.
not really a minor detail. And then there's the pointed reference to America's standing in the free market. The transcript even says the US is seen as no longer leading, implying that our global reputation is on the line here.
Yeah, that's a critical point. It's like the whole discourse is trying to draft an image of the US as both a victim of a trade battle and an economic underdog. And when they mention that the market drop is the worst since the Great Depression, it's a real scare
I can see
tactic.
that. It almost paints the picture of a president whose approach is more theatrical than substantive, wouldn't you say? Because then we hear about his approval ratings, his economic ratings, and even his handling of conversations with top Chinese leaders.
Exactly. And then there's that particular part where it says the president expects China to come begging for relief. Now, if you ask me, wishing for relief like that seems,
Yeah, that's
well,
a
a
fair
bit
critique.
optimistic or maybe unrealistic.
It feels like amid all this, the true economic indicators are getting lost. I mean, the transcript even dives into IMF forecasts, predicting US growth dropping to 1.8% this year compared to last year's 2.8%. That's a stark change.
Definitely. And it speaks to the broader uncertainty in the global market. It's like the US trade policies, the ambiguous negotiations, And these tariffs are all contributing to a climate of unpredictability.
Yep, perfectly said. And like, the dialogue even suggests that this uncertainty might push us into a recession quicker than expected. It's not just political theater. There's a real economic risk here.
Absolutely. That risk is compounded by the fact that many Americans are beginning to lose trust, not only in these economic policies, but in the leadership itself. The transcript even touches on how Trump's ratings have dropped among key voter groups, like Hispanic voters,
Which is quite significant. So ultimately, what we're seeing is a blend of political spectacle, questionable economic claims, and uncertain market impacts, all wrapped in this very complex geopolitical narrative involving China. And then there's that bit at the end about following on Instagram, a nod to the modern media frenzy.
Right, it's like the entire conversation is a microcosm of our times, a mix of hot-button policy issues, media spin, and a rapidly shifting economic landscape. And it leaves you asking, where do we go from here?
Yep, that's the big question. And honestly, it shows us just how intertwined politics and economics have become. Every decision, every comment seems to ripple out to affect the markets and public opinion.
For sure. It's like watching a high-stakes chess game where every move sends shockwaves, and the stakes aren't just political, they're, well, economic and social too.
Couldn't have said it better. And while some of these claims are hyperbolic, the underlying uncertainty in these discussions definitely signals that we need more clarity and accountability in both trade and domestic economic policies.
Exactly. It's a reminder that behind the theatrics and grand statements, there's a real economy and real people who are feeling the impact. And that's what makes these conversations so important, even if they're sometimes as messy
really.
as they come.
All right, that's quite a deep dive into this whirlwind of trade, tariffs, and political strategy. Thanks for breaking it down. It's been a wild ride.
My pleasure. Always good to unpack these complex topics and see what's really at play.